While I was recovering from surgery, I started having these really weird comments about bagels. And I was like,
Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, hello. If you are returning, welcome back. Thank you so much for sticking around. I really appreciate you. So before we talk about anything else, we hit 100K, okay? It happened. We're actually at I think 101,000 now, and I ordered my play button yesterday, and this all is just so strange but so cool. If you would have said that, if you would have told Megan when she was a teenager that we would be here, she would not believe you. So thank you so much for trusting my voice online enough to hit that button. That means the most to me. Also, I'm sorry if you can hear the heat in the background. I normally turn it off when I'm filming, but it's so cold in Denver right now. The heat needs to stay on. I'm really proud of the community that we've built here, and I will always be really proud of the community that we've built here. And I cannot thank you enough for changing my life, basically, by liking my content enough to interact with it and subscribe to it and all of that. While we are on the topic of community, I am posting this on January 21st, or I'm filming this intro on January 21st. I think I've always thought, ever since the results in November, that community is going to be the most important thing. And I feel like I don't really need to say this, but I just want to, just in case there's any question. If you are feeling scared based on things that happened, just any rhetoric that's been spewed, or just things that happened yesterday in particular at the inauguration, I just want to say that you're safe here. And I've always prided myself on making this a safe community for people who may not feel safe in the world around them at the moment, especially in my country of America. You're safe here. I will do everything in my power to make sure that you remain safe here. And if you're looking for anything like a community or whatever, go to the Discord server down below. That is a really great place. Everybody there is really great. And yeah, I just wanted to throw that in here while we were talking about community, because I feel like it's really important. But yeah, thank you guys so much for 100K, and I am so excited to keep growing and see what happens, but this is such a huge milestone for me, and I cried when I got there, and yeah, so thank you all so much for that. And today, we're going to be talking about Anna O'Brien, or GlitterAndLazers. She is part of a podcast now called The Medical Detectives, where she is alongside an orthopedic surgeon. And they state that they're going to delve into different individuals' stories regarding medical mysteries or difficult medical diagnoses processes and stuff like that. And but the most notable part of this is that Anna's story is the first episode, and I think I'm the last person to post my reaction to this, but we're still doing it. I recorded it last night while playing Stardew Valley, because I didn't really know how to react to a podcast. So, because there wasn't anything visual involved, but regardless, it is super long, as you can probably tell by the length of this video. So grab a bagel and buckle in. Okay, see you over there. But before we get into today's video, I want to thank today's video sponsor, Magic Spoon. As someone who loves snacks and is always looking for a sweet treat, but particularly a sweet treat that won't completely obliterate my nutrition goals, Magic Spoon has been a great addition to my pantry. Magic Spoon cereals and treats fit a variety of diets with high protein content, little to no sugar, and are great for carb-conscious lifestyles. In fact, the treats have 11 to 12 grams of protein, 1 gram of sugar, and 1 to 2 grams of net carbs. And the cereals have 13 to 14 grams of protein, 0 sugar, and 4 to 5 grams of net carbs per serving, so you can feel good about what you are eating. The flavors are literally like the cereals that I used to eat when I was a kid, except they are now with upgraded grown-up ingredients. I always aim to get about 30 grams of protein in my first meal of the day, so pairing some high protein milk with a Magic Spoon cereal has been a game changer for me, making it easier than ever for me to get that protein goal in the morning, especially in mornings when I'm going to the office and don't necessarily have a lot of time to cook breakfast for myself. And the treats are a great dessert for lunch or for to pair with lunch or dinner, or just as a little snack, a little pick-me-up, you know, in the middle of the day when the 3 p.m. sleepies hit at work. I especially love the cocoa flavor of the cereals and the blueberry muffin flavor of the treats. So if you want to give Magic Spoon a try for yourself, use my code MeganAnne, that's MEGANANNE, or click the link down below in my description, or scan the QR code that's up on the screen here to get $5 off. Magic Spoon is so confident in their product that it is backed with a 100% happiness guarantee online, so if you don't like it for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. And you can also find Magic Spoon on Amazon or in your local grocery store. Well, so thank you so much to Magic Spoon for sending me a bunch of fun things to try and for sponsoring this video. And as always, thank you so much to you guys for continuing to interact with my content so that brands like Magic Spoon want to keep working with me. Okay, now let's get back into the nonsense. Hello! I'm coming at you in a much different format than I think I've ever done a reaction, but I didn't really know how to film a reaction to a podcast, and I'm also coming at you freshly showered, pimple patched up in my pajamas, no nails, because I'm filming this at around like 8:30 on the night of Inauguration Day, and I'll be honest, besties, this is all I have the energy to give you right now. So, yeah, but I think I'm going to cover, I haven't filmed the intro or anything to this video yet, but I think I covered already that I have watched a couple of reactions to this podcast already, and I've just stopped them because I was like, I want to do this on my own. And Tiny Blue Anthropologist played The Sims in hers because she was like, I need something to do with my hands, and I also need something to keep me from pausing so frequently and talking about a bunch of things. And so I was like, that's genius. So we are going to be playing Stardew Valley today, a newer save that I started with a bunch of mods in it because I have played this game 100,000,000 times, but I've never gotten to know like all the side characters and all the NPCs, and that was my goal with starting this new save, so that's what we're gonna be doing. But yeah, let's just get into everything, shall we? Because this is an hour and 14 minutes, so let's get rocking.
Welcome to the very first episode of the Medical Detectives Podcast, where each week we'll dive into the fascinating, mysterious, and sometimes downright bizarre world of medicine, told by the people who've lived it.
We're your hosts. I'm Anna O'Brien.
And I'm Dr. Nance, an orthopedic surgeon with a passion for uncovering disparities in medicine. I've built a platform on bringing awareness to misdiagnosis in women and sharing stories that can hopefully help people navigate the complicated world of medicine.
And I'm Anna. I'm a creator with my own medical journey, and while Dr. Nance has all of the experience of a doctor, I know what it's like to be a patient with my own medical mystery.
Okay, so this was the first, I know we have not even made it a minute into this podcast, but this was the first place that I wanted to start with pausing, because I also, for the record, have not made it through this whole podcast yet. I think I've made it like 15 minutes in, maybe, and I was like, no, I want the rest of my reaction to be raw and real. Anyways, so we're already starting this podcast off like setting it up as though Anna is some kind of like, or that we're talking about like medical mysteries, and that Anna has had her own medical mystery and all of this kind of stuff, which Anna has talked about a lot in her previous narratives about her whole story, but like a lot of people are pointing out in other reactions from the little bits that I've watched, she does flip the script and change the narrative a lot in this podcast. And yeah, but I just think it's interesting that, one, we're talking with an orthopedic surgeon, which I'm not. Also, important disclaimer, I'm not a doctor. I went to art school, okay? But I just think an orthopedic surgeon is a very different kind of doctor to be discussing the topic of obesity with, because that's what we're going to be talking about here with Anna. And so, yeah, just keep that in mind. But yeah, I just wanted to say, I think this is a very interesting setup here for just kind of already planting the seed of how Anna's going to be framing her story. Anyways, let's keep going.
And I'm here to ask the questions that you, the audience, are going to be wondering.
This show is all about sharing unique medical stories that are not just fascinating, but could also be helpful, whether you're a patient, a caregiver, or just someone who loves a good mystery.
Each week we'll have a guest on the show to share their personal medical story, and we'll unpack it together. But today, for the first episode, things are a little bit different.
That's right, Anna, because for this first episode, our
petition to get me on the podcast to talk about my chronic illness diagnosis process. I don't think Anna would ever want to talk to me, but it's a good story. It's a really good story.
Our guest is you.
Yep, I'm in the hot seat today. So if I sound just a little bit nervous, it's because I am. I'm representing you and your stories. And I also represent people who don't have a medical degree, who aren't going to know all of the lingo and might be a little confused along the way. I've experienced personally the highs and lows and frustrations of navigating the healthcare system. So to be the first person to kick this off kind of feels right.
Anna's story is the perfect way to kick things off. Her story is relatable, full of surprises, and I just feel so lucky she's decided to share it with us.
I just feel lucky to have the opportunity to share it because I wish stories like this were available to me on my journey, and now they will be. My story is about a lot of different things. The stigma plus-size bodies face when receiving medical care, the body positive movement, and also being a medical mystery and what that feels like. But that's just a few of the things we'll talk about. Mine is just one of the many stories we're going to be telling on this show, and I'm really excited to be doing this with you. We just hope that this show will give people and patients a place to be seen, to find community, and learn from these incredible stories on their own medical journeys.
Absolutely. So buckle up, because this first story sets the stage for everything to come. Anna, you ready to dive in?
Let's do it. Hello, Dr. Nance.
Hi, Anna. Welcome to the show.
I know. I'm a little nervous because on this first episode, it's me.
I don't know any other podcast where the co-hosts actually interview the other co-host, so I'm excited.
Yeah, it's a whirlwind. I think that it is important though, because I think it makes sense as to why I'm here, right? Like, obviously you make sense. You're a doctor, but why am I here? I ask that all the time.
Well, I'd actually love to start with the why. Can you share your intention of sharing your story?
Yeah, so my intention with all of this, and even when this came across my plate as something potentially to do, it really is that I've been on a really long journey, right? And I would say that in some ways I'm not even at the end yet, but every step I've taken forward has significantly improved my life. And for a really long time, and we'll talk a little bit more about this when I, share my story, I was afraid to take the first step because of a lot of the noise surrounding me. And I think if I can encourage just one person to take a step towards feeling better, and whatever that means for them, because it is incredibly personal, then it will have been worth it. And I think that women are in a lot of ways built to be afraid of medicine and doctors and seeking health. And we're sold so many other solutions that aren't really solutions, that I'm here to advocate and speak for the fact that there are doctors out there that care, and it may just take some work to find them.
Well, that's a great way to start. So you mentioned that you started to notice kind of some changes in your body. When were you aware that?
Okay, so I just want to go back a little bit and talk about the way that Anna is posing this as a women's medical issue. You know what I mean? Because yes, women's health is like wildly under-researched, right? And I experienced this myself with I have PMDD. I don't know if I've ever talked about this a lot in a video, but like I have PMDD, which is premenstrual dysphoric disorder, and it's basically PMS on steroids, right? And there's a lot to it, and I've been treating it for the last like year, or no, not year, maybe like 6 months or so. And getting diagnosed with that and learning what I have to do to treat it and all of that was life-changing for me. But PMDD is like so not talked about in the world of women's health. And I think it needs to be screamed about from the rooftops, because it's really dangerous to not talk about it. And I think it's causing a lot of unnecessary, probably unalives of women who don't know that it exists and don't know that they have it. So all this to say is I know that it is like women's health is wildly under researched, and women oftentimes are not taken seriously when they go to the doctor, because it's just a thing. It's just how it's been. It's how it is now. And I do think it's getting better, but I think it's going to take a long time for it to fully be fixed. And so I think that is a good thing to talk about in a podcast. I'm not saying that's not a good thing to talk about. I'm also not saying it's not a good thing to talk about how fat people are oftentimes not taken seriously at the doctor either, for things that don't have anything to do with their weight. I'm not saying that is not a good thing to talk about at all either, because I think that is also an issue. Also, I'm sorry if I'm like looking everywhere. I forget that my camera is up here. But I think that is a decent thing to talk about as well. But I just think the way that Anna is setting this scene is very disingenuous, because as you all know, if you have watched any of my videos on Anna, she likes to spin the narrative, and she likes to make herself out to be the good guy or the victim in certain situations. And I think that is what a lot of this podcast is. And a lot of not acknowledging how her own habits and everything could have contributed to her medical mysteries and stuff like that. And so, yeah, I just think the way that this is being set up is kind of disingenuous, and I didn't like it when I heard it, because especially when she was talking about like how she was afraid to take the first steps forward because of all the noise around her and stuff like that. I don't know if she's talking about the noise surrounding her on social media, or if it was just noise in her personal life. We might get to that, but like, if it was noise on social media surrounding her, that's people calling out things she's lied about. So, yeah, I have a whole history lesson on her. I have a couple other videos documenting some long game lies that she has done on her various platforms. But yeah, I didn't like the way that she was setting this up, and that was one of the main reasons I wanted to talk about this podcast at all.
Your body was not the same as everyone else around you.
So the changes in my body really started to happen around puberty. I just started to gain weight, which was kind of unusual because I was always a really active kid. Like they used to call the church doors the Anna doors, because I was running in and out of them all the time, causing trouble. And I used to
Important context also, maybe. I don't know if it's important for the rest of this podcast, but Anna grew up Mormon. I don't know how Mormon she grew up, but I do know she grew up Mormon. Oh, also, if you can hear the heat in the back of this video, normally I turn it off when I'm filming. It's fucking cold in Colorado right now. So even by my upper peninsula of Michigan State, it is cold. So the heat just has to stay on. But anyways, yeah, Anna grew up Mormon. I don't know how Mormon, like how involved she was in the bit of Tiny Blue Anthropologist's video that I saw. Her brother did get married in the temple, and I didn't know that. But yeah, other than that, I don't know like how Mormon Anna and her family were versus still are. I don't know, or like still are. I don't know. But yeah, so when she talks about the church doors, she did grow up Mormon. Which I do think contributes a lot to her like toxic positivity that I talk about a lot with her, and I think I covered that in my history lesson as well. But yeah, important context, you grew up Mormon.
Do this dance where I would move my feet really fast because I just had so much energy. So it was puzzling to a lot of people, how was I gaining weight? And the first thing went to like, oh, she must be eating wrong, right? So I remember around that time when I started to gain weight that my mom took me to this really shady doctor in the middle of nowhere. And I remember even as a little kid being like, this place is sketch. And went in, there was like one of those little windows that they pulled open, and I looked inside, and the woman asked me like 3 questions. Not one of them was my age or my weight or anything like that. It was literally like, do you have a heart murmur? Do you have any of these other conditions, diabetes, I think? And this is like at 8 years old. Shut the door, took me in. This older man gave me a speech about why I was awful because I was overweight. And then he wrote me a prescription for what I now know was Fen-Phen. So at 8 years old, I started taking Fen-Phen. And wild.
Okay, so I think they talk about this too in the podcast, but if you don't know what Fen-Phen is, it was a diet pill that entered the market, I believe, in the 90s, probably before Megan was on this earth. Oh, Elliot, love you. Anyways, was before Megan was on this earth, but I think they're going to talk about it. It was taken off because it had a lot of like adverse side effects, particularly like cardiovascular side effects and things like that. Because it was like a wild stimulant, and which is funny because I went on phentermine a couple years ago, and it led me to get my OCD diagnosis because my brain just worked properly because it was also a stimulant, and turns out my brain needed that. But yeah, and again, in Tiny Blue Anthropologist video, from the bit that I did watch, she seemed to remember that the cutoff age limit, like the minimum age limit that could be prescribed Fen-Phen, was 16. And so I don't know the validity to this story, if that is true. And also wild that her mom would have her prescribed a diet pill at 8 years old. Because also, if you will remember from my history lesson, if you've seen that, Anna's mom and sister both passed away due to obesity-related complications. So I don't know if Anna's mom was experiencing or was obese at the time of taking her daughter to get prescribed diet pills. I don't know, but that all just seems very backwards to me. But I wasn't there. But yeah, based on what Tiny Blue Anthropologist said and all of that, I don't know about the validity of this. But yeah, I just wanted to put that in here.
Fen-Phen is a stimulant that was a popular kind of diet drug in the 90s, but it had significant side effects, mainly cardiac problems. So it is no longer used to treat obesity.
Yeah, let's just say that's to look back at that now, and even to have had to do some things on my journey because of that, because now what we know what Fen-Phen can do to the body, there were concerns about heart issues when I was pursuing other things down the road. So I don't know why that was okay. I don't know why it was so casual. I think I'm still coming to terms with why my parents thought.
Okay, so I will say, I've actually so I've had a video on my list, my to-do list, about like Ozempic, like GLP-1 influencers, and just the weird world surrounding weight loss medications and things like that. Because one of the things that was like the most alarming to me, and I know this has nothing to do with what we're going to talk. Well, maybe it does. One of the things that was like the most alarming to me because my doctor just prescribed me phentermine when I went on it, but I think it was because I had had the experience with like bariatric surgery and all of that, and so like I kind of knew what to expect. But like when I did research on it, like before I started taking it, because I did that because I was scared because I'd never been on a stimulant before, I was shocked at the amount of like med spas and Groupons that were available that were just like giving this stuff out. And so like I know I question the validity of Anna's story, but like also maybe not because like that kind of stuff still happens. And I think to give out weight loss drugs, especially things like phentermine, that's like an actual like amphetamine stimulant, that they just give it I don't know, man. It seems sus and I don't like it. Oh my god, these crows, get out of my garden. Anyways, yeah, so I was just thinking about that. Like maybe I actually don't fully question the validity of that because it's still very much happening. I don't know, just thoughts.
I don't know why it was so casual. I think I'm still coming to terms with why my parents thought that was okay to do. But regardless of it, I was put on that. And I lost some weight, but not really. And I just remember during that period of my life that every once in a while I would get to eat normal food. So my mom, I remember, threw everything away in the house, like had this big menagerie where like everything that in my opinion at the time tasted good was in the garbage. We were left with like brown rice, flavorless chicken, shredded wheat, and vegetables. That's it. And I remember, and I have this very vivid memory of when I was about, I want to say 10 or 11. I went to my friend Nikki S's house and her mom made me a cheeseburger. And I remember sitting there eating that cheeseburger being like, this is the best thing I've ever had in my entire life. This cheeseburger, wow. And this like cheese, it wasn't even probably that good of a cheeseburger, but because I'd eaten such terrible food for like a while.
Like we're talking In-N-Out cheeseburger or
yeah, like it was probably like McDonald's cheeseburger, but I just remember being like, oh my God. I was like, my life has forever changed. Like music played, lights flashed. Like it was like this amazing thing. And
so many people in my history lesson said that she's like the adult JoJo Siwa. And I can't not think of that whenever I hear her talk now. Anyway, sorry. That's so unnecessary.
I didn't die. There were no issues. And I just had a normal day. And I remember that up until that point, I had a really weird relationship between pleasing my parents and losing weight. Like I felt every time I got on the scale that I was a little bit of a failure because I wasn't losing as quickly as they thought I should have been losing taking fen-phen. But I was starving and still very active. So what ended up happening is life was just kind of.
So yeah, I think this is an interesting conversation to have, and like I will give that to this podcast because I do think there is a way to approach weight loss with your kids, and I think growing up in the early 2000s, 90s, whatever this was, I think was not probably the best time to have to do that as the kid, you know? As a kid myself who grew up in the early 2000s and grew up fat, my parents did the best they could. Like, I don't hold any resentment to my parents for, like, how they treated me, like, in regards to my weight and, like, trying to lose it and whatever, because I don't think I want to have kids, but like I don't know how I would approach like nutrition and health and fitness and stuff like that yet if I did, because I think it is such a fine line to toe between it's important information and knowledge that like people should have and people should learn growing up and kids should learn growing up, and then like making it like toxic, you know what I mean? And so I just think this in itself is an interesting conversation to have, and I have no doubt in my mind that this is something that affected Anna, because it's something that affected me as well. And like I always kind of dealt with those feelings too, of like if I went on a diet that like my parents put me on or my doctor put me on with my parents and stuff like that, like I did feel like a failure if and when it didn't work. You know what I mean? And that was really, really hard. And I also think that had to do with a lot of my like people pleasing tendencies that I am still unlearning today. But I do think that fatness in the 90s, when it came to parents, like having an overweight kid in the 90s and stuff, it was like, I don't know, like the early, like the 90s and early 2000s and things like that were such a horrible time when it came to body image and body trends and things like that. I just don't think our parents really knew what they were doing and knew how to approach it correctly. And I'm just saying this from my experience. Like I said, I don't fault my parents at all for like how they approached my weight and weight loss and things like that. But I do empathize with the feeling of feeling like a failure because you weren't losing weight on the plans and stuff that you were given. And yeah, so I totally get this. I think this is a decent thing to talk about here in a podcast like this for sure. But yeah, I just want to talk about that because I get it.
You know, bleak. And so I stopped, I would say in a little bit, I stopped being as active because I had no freaking energy. And my body started to change because I wasn't the same active person I was before. And I started to put on weight instead of losing it. And I think at this point, a lot of the articles and stuff that came out about fen-phen, you know, we all got off of it because it wasn't legal anymore. So basically, I gained a bunch of weight and I kind of just accepted it. In my 20s, I moved on from my parents. I moved into a really amazing group of friends. And I think that every friend group goes through this. I mean, I hope they still don't go through it, but back when I was in my 20s, everybody went through it, which was like the collective culture where girls got together and dieted together. So we did the thing that everybody seemed to do, which was join Weight Watchers, right? You know, we all got together, we'd go to our group meetings together, we would support each other, we'd share recipes, we'd weigh in. And honestly, I built my friendships around losing weight. And that's a really weird dynamic, right? Where that success in losing weight was also like a success of friendship. When it doesn't work for you as simple as that, it's almost like you're a failure in your friendship dynamic, which is something that I'm honestly, I don't know if I realized until I just started talking about this part of it. But like, I think as we fast forward and I stopped losing weight, I lost about 100 pounds that way just by literally getting active as part of this Weight Watchers group. And I would go to Soul Cycle with these girls. I would run to Soul Cycle, do 1 to 2 Soul Cycle classes and run back. I started walking to work. So I would walk from Brooklyn to Midtown Manhattan, which is about a 4-mile walk. And I would walk there and back. And I started just becoming really, really active. Again, I never was like a binge eater or an overeater. So it kind of was like my activity just jumped up and that's where the weight went. But then it stopped. I had lost weight and gained weight before. But this was very different because I was gaining weight while still maintaining a really healthy lifestyle. So I was still going to spin class. I was still running. I was still eating healthy. I was still walking to and from work. So it didn't make sense that I was gaining weight back. I honestly didn't know what to think. I felt very cheated. I felt very angry because I felt like I did everything right and this is my predicament. So like what the hell? What the hell? And
So I'm gonna pause here because I have a lot of thoughts. I think it's interesting that she like introduces the idea of like friends, basically an accountability group, right, being like a bad thing. I do understand how there could be like some competition that starts up there and it could get unhealthy and whatever. I understand that is a possibility. But I also think that having some form of accountability partner or some kind of accountability person isn't necessarily a bad thing. And I think it's interesting that she poses it as such. But I will say, judging by what we know about Anna now, I think it's important to have the context of her when she's talking about, like, I was still eating really healthy and I was still like really, really active and all that. Like, what is her version of that in her mind? Because as someone who grew up fat and wound up getting weight loss surgery and whatever, and in the process of getting weight loss surgery, I learned just how skewed my view of my view of eating healthy was. Like, I thought I was eating healthy, or I thought I was like staying in a caloric deficit even though I wasn't tracking and things like that. Like, I learned like just how skewed my view of those things was when I started my bariatric program. And so I would just be really interested to know like what Anna's view of that in her 20s was. Based on what we know of how she talks about it now when she's older. I think the whole issue with this podcast in my brain is that Anna is an unreliable narrator as it is. And I don't know if she should necessarily be on a podcast about health and medical things, because I do think she's a very, very unreliable narrator. My God, we've been filming for half an hour and we're only 12 minutes into this podcast. Okay, let's keep going.
I did start to feel, and I don't think I've ever admitted this to myself until this podcast, which is a little bit wild, but I think I started to isolate myself because I was embarrassed that I wasn't able to keep up with my friends who were making, oh God, already crying, who were making all of these amazing changes in their life. And I was making the same changes, but not seeing the same success. So you begin to build this mental capacity of like, I must be lying to myself. I must be a failure. I don't want to have the conversation about why isn't it working. And I don't even know if my friends judged me in that way, but I judged myself in that way because I built my entire community and friendship around managing weight. And then I couldn't be successful in that friendship because I wasn't losing weight anymore. I even felt that way partially in my job. Like, it's wild to think, when I'm really honest with myself, how much that inability to achieve that goal really messed me up.
Well, I think which obesity as a medical term, right, and label carries an unwarranted moral judgment to it that does not apply to other medical conditions.
Yes. I think that there is a lot of stigma about obesity, and I think there's a lot of stigma about bodies in general and what visual cues they give us. So regardless of whether you're plus size or you use a wheelchair, people are going to assume an inordinate amount of things about you based on that visual picture. And as much as you may be different than that visual picture, you are never given the benefit of the doubt. In fact, you're always climbing back from a negative assumption. The hardest part about not losing weight for me is that I didn't know what else to fix. And I think the automatic reaction to me was just to do more. But then what happens is you do more, and I would eat less and less. I would work out more and more. And I would say, honestly, running to SoulCycle, doing 2 classes and running back is probably not healthy behavior. It's just not. And there was one point in my life where I would have been proud of that, would have been like, look at all the exercise I was doing. But the reality is like, I was trying to compensate for what my body wasn't doing. And I thought, well, maybe if I just pushed harder, maybe if I just did more, it would change. And then when it didn't, I really did feel like a failure. I also felt like I was delusional. I think that's a really good word for for my whole entire journey is like, maybe I'm lying to myself, right? Like maybe I am eating all of these things. Maybe my calorie counting is off. Maybe I'm not exercising as hard as I think I am. Maybe I'm not going fast enough on that bike. So it becomes this constant internal, like, what can I do more, until you just break down and give up. And that's essentially what happened. I just finally was like, this is too freaking much. I'm done. And I started to feel just unconnected to my friends. So I dove into work. I would work constantly. I would sleep in the office. And in line with that, we were testing a new piece of software that was for content management for social media. We needed to test that software. I was like, well, I'll just make some Instagram content. We'll see if that does well. I don't really care. It's all about the job. And anyone who knows me knows that I am a somewhat recovering workaholic. I'm still working on it, but it is who I am. So I became really good at regularly posting, at trying different things, because I was trying to test this software that helped brands and companies do that.
That's the thing too, and I think I covered this in my history lesson. Anna has worked in social media her entire career, which I do too. I work in social media now. That's my full-time job as well. I understand. But like she worked like in social media. And like, so that's why I also just take anything she posts now with such a huge grain of salt, because like she knows how to play the game, you know? And because the social media game is a very, very real thing. And yeah, so that's why I also just like have an issue kind of trusting a lot of what she posts online, because she does know what to do. So yeah.
Well, I worked really hard, and because of that, I inadvertently grew a following on social media, just trying to test new technology. And it started off kind of slow. I remember I had like 10,000 followers, maybe in the first couple months. And I was like blown away by that. I was like, I've made it big. But I had no clue what that would lead to. You start with the 10K, and then it's 20K, and then it's 50K, and then it's 100K, and then it's, oh my God, 200,000 people follow me. But that also means that there is a lot of people who feel like they have a say in my life, for good and for bad. Being in a bigger body is very polarizing, and sometimes that's just enough. That just existing in a bigger body and not apologizing for it is enough of a reason to hate me.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm really trying not to pause a lot, but when you put yourself online, especially if you work in social media, and granted, when Anna started working in social media, it still was like a relatively new thing, I think, like especially for like with in terms of making money on it and things like that. But like when you put yourself on social media as a public figure, like you have to know that you are like opening yourself up to criticism, regardless of if you're a fat person or not. Like that's just what you're doing. Like that's the nature of the beast. Like people are gonna have opinions, and whether they are factual or not is a whole different thing. And it does get annoying. Like I'm not gonna lie, like sometimes it really does get annoying. But like I think Anna posing herself as kind of like the victim in this situation is very odd, because like you don't have to do that. And I know she talked about it as like this thing that kind of grew like outside of her control, and I understand that, but also you can just stop. Like if you don't like the attention you're getting, if you don't like the feedback you're getting, if you whatever, like you can just stop. You don't need to do it. I feel like now with how much she's on social media, it's a little bit different, but at that point, like you can just stop and that's it. And so I think her kind of, like I said, posing herself as a kind of victim-y here is interesting, because being on social media just like is a choice. You don't have to do it.
And one day I was a nobody, and all of a sudden I was like enemy number one to some people. And I think that's when I noticed, actually, if I have to be incredibly honest, the time where I realized my life had been changed by this forever is I posted a picture of myself in a swimsuit, just a normal picture, just me on a beach. And Gillette, the company, asked me if they could use it to just repost. And again, at this point, I didn't know anything about making money. I wasn't making any money. And I was like, sure, you can repost this. I don't care. They ended up using it. It ended up getting in the wrong hands, and it became international news. People saying that a plus size person should not be used in advertising for a product like a razor. And it ended up to someone doing a podcast about whether or not plus size people should be in advertising. It was a very, very popular podcast. I'm not going to name it specifically, but they had a long discussion about whether I should be seen or whether or not people like me should be seen. And it led to me actually getting attacked on a sidewalk. And it's part of the reason I left New York. I think that's when it clicked that I was in a lot of ways powerful, because if I could make somebody this angry, then that's pretty powerful. But also I had to think about my life in a very different way. I had to protect myself, and I had to learn to navigate in this world where people knew who I was and had an opinion about me. I also started to get very involved in the body positivity movement, and this opened up a whole different world where my weight was seen in just a very different way for the first time in my life. So now I had this beautiful place in social media where people were like, you're beautiful, you're special. And we were talking about bigger bodies in a different way. I had lived in this world where I had learned to accept negative preconceived opinions of me and rise above them, which is, again, a great skill, but not super healthy or amazing to live in. And now was presented with a world where I didn't have to prove anything, or at least it felt like I didn't have to prove anything. And that was, for lack of a better word, addictive. We were right in that crux of body positivity coming to light. So the acceptance of a bigger body was on the way of being more accepted versus less. And so there was a lot of advocacy. There was a lot of supportive people. Don't get me wrong, still bad people out there saying mean things. That is the internet. But it was definitely a better place. And
it's the internet.
That space gave me hope in a lot of ways. Hope that I could learn to live in this body and not necessarily constantly be focused on changing that body. And the body positive community helped me stop measuring my value in a size and helped me start appreciating what my body was capable of. And I will always be grateful for that. That said, my time in that community did cause some harm. And I think that that's really hard to say, because I don't want people to feel betrayed or hurt or like I'm biting the hand that fed me. But there's a lot of things in that community that make going to the doctor or even doing basic everyday things scary. There's a lot of discussion about how the medical community doesn't support fat bodies, which is true in a lot of instances, but it doesn't mean that all medical professionals are out to get plus size people. Also, there was a lot of discussion about it's okay to take a break, it's okay to be tired, which, again, a valuable insight into life. But I began to feel like, being tired is just part of a bigger body. Being exhausted, being in pain, these things are just normal because I am plus size. So it began to write a script for me that this was just my reality. And this is the reality I had to live in. And I just got, for lack of a better word, shitty cards. And there's nothing I could do.
This is a great segue.
I think this is super interesting. I hadn't made it this far in the podcast, and I agree with Anna here. I talk about this a lot on my channel, and I talk about fat activism and body positivity, which I think are one and the same now. But well, not anymore, but when Anna was talking about it, they were. I think this is really interesting because I think she's talking about kind of what I talk about, where the things that they preach in their rhetoric and things like that, oftentimes create issues where issues don't exist, and it can create bigger issues in the people who subscribe to those kinds of narratives. And yeah, I've never heard Anna say that before. Interesting. Anyways, all right.
Way into a question about when you started to think about perhaps your size as a more medical issue, if there were something else beyond just your size that was causing you to feel tired and everything that you just described.
I'm going to be really, really candid about all of this. This is a podcast, so we're just going to be real, right? I hadn't had a normal poop for years, and it was beginning to affect my ability to do basic everyday things.
Sure.
And I would get so exhausted on top of this. Sorry, I just said the poop because I was like, that was the thing that like broke the camel's back. But it would also be things like I would go and have a great day. Like I did all of these things. I'm like, man, my body's amazing. I can do all of these things. And then I would pass out. And I would physically be unable to leave my bed. Like everything in my body would just break down. And I would be stuck that way for 2 to 3 days. I would have gastrointestinal issues. I sometimes would be vomiting. I would be violently ill. I started struggling to get out of bed just in general. And I kept pushing myself physically because around this point, I started to feel in my body really broken down. So as I'm in this community, I just kept thinking, oh, the reason my knee hurts is because I'm fatter. The reason my ankle hurts is because I'm fatter. The reason my thighs hurt are because I'm fatter. The reason I'm tired is because I'm fatter. The reason when I stand up, I almost pass out is because I'm fatter. All of these things just became related to the weight, and that's just how my body was. And so I initially pretended like a lot of those things didn't exist. I think when it became really clear, I have one moment I remember that is the moment where I realized I couldn't live like this anymore. I was in Hawaii. We were filming swimsuits or something, you know, as
before she talks about this, I want to say that like two things can be true at once. Like something can be going on internally that maybe doesn't have to do with your weight and is causing these side effects, but like also like your weight can also be causing these feelings and side effects, right? Like I experienced that with my chronic illness that I have. I have chronic fatigue syndrome. I've talked about it before. I've been diagnosed with it since I was 16. So like 12 years. Still affects me to this day, like still affected me even at my lowest weight after weight loss surgery, all that. But I will say some of the symptoms that I had, after weight loss and stuff like that, like in terms of like my joints and things like that, like they did go away. And I noticed a big difference in like my back, my like lumbar health and things like that. Like I wasn't hurting my back, doing nothing as much as I used to, and all of that. And like I said, I think two things can be true at once. And so I think Anna like pushing all of these things as like, oh, I was thinking they were because I was bigger, but I think she's going to get to saying that they weren't and all of that. Like I think that's kind of irresponsible because like your weight can affect and does affect your like energy levels and your joint health and feelings and things like that. So two things to be true at the same time.
One does as a creator, and I couldn't walk in the sand. It hurt so bad. And there's a video of me somewhere, I'd burn it if I could, where I fall into the sand and I just cry. And then I scream, turn the effing camera off. I don't want anyone to see me like this. I'm so ashamed. And I was this person who represented someone who loves their body. And I was at war with my body. And in that moment, I was like, I am such a liar. And I think that moment is where I was like, I need to make some changes. And I did not share that with the internet right away. I never shared that specific moment with the internet because it was too personal. I sometimes wonder if I've hurt people. As a creator in the body positivity space, I parroted a lot of the same messages that everybody else did, you know? love your body, indulge in what you want. Life is short, don't.
She still does, by the way. Even though she's gone on like this health journey and things like that. Like, in my opinion, she still does parrot a lot of these things. But yeah.
Don't feel like you need to have this health standard. And that line of thinking at a very high level isn't wrong, right? But I often wonder if I have driven people to not seek health. And I wonder if there's people who listened to me, who believed in me, who followed me, and are worse off because of it.
Wow.
And
Self-awareness.
so part of the
Dang.
reason I share a lot about my health journey is because I have that guilt, and that guilt is going to follow me forever. And I did it unintentionally, and I did it because I myself was broken. But I believe that there has to be this space where we can acknowledge that bodies come in different shapes and sizes, while at the same time acknowledge that just because your body doesn't fit a certain shape doesn't mean you should not care how you feel. It's a really complicated conversation, and it is very nuanced, and there are a lot of very angry voices in it. And I understand why they're angry, right? I get that anger because I've been there, and in a lot of ways, in some ways, I'm still there. But the messaging is at times causing the same problems it's trying to prevent. And
Okay, I don't want to take away from Anna's like emotions here or anything like that, because I feel like they are genuine. And Lord knows I've been crying a lot this week. But I just also want to say I respect what she's saying, and I totally get that, and all of it. I'm actually shocked at this level of self-awareness. But the way that Anna has shared her health journey and things like that online has been wildly disingenuous. Like, she has lied about a lot of things. She's lied about the timeline of a lot of things, where it really, really mattered. And I break that down in a few of my videos on her. I'll have those linked down below if you want to see them. And so I think this self-awareness and things like that is all well and good, and I'm actually kind of like shocked at it, like I said. But it is worth noting that like she did lie about being on GLP-1 drugs. She did lie about what else? There were some other discrepancies with like her lipedema timeline and things like that. And yeah, so like it's not all like sunshine and rainbows. She's sharing her story to like be a better person and like help because she feels guilt and everything. It might be in her mind, but she has lied a lot during that time. And so yeah, taking this one podcast, it seems all really, really good and admirable, but like she has lied a lot. And I've talked about that on my channel ad nauseum. And like I said, I'll have those linked down below.
And I don't know if I'll ever be smart enough or eloquent enough to fully explain that dichotomy, but it is a community that saved me, but also a community that broke me. And that is a really, really difficult thing to explain.
I want to share with you something that my mentor told me a long time ago about why people seek help. And he's a joint replacement surgeon, right? So he deals with people who have terrible arthritis in their knees and their hips all the time. And he asked me, he said, do you know when people come to me and they say, I want a knee replacement? I said, oh, like, when their x-ray looks terrible and they're in, so much pain. And he said, it's not about the pain. People can handle pain, and people are handling pain all the time. It's when you are emotionally fatigued from the pain that is when they come to see me and they tell me they need
And
That's
so
true.
you should feel no guilt in that you felt like it took too long for you to seek answers and reach out for help. I would say that's the norm.
Thank you. Thank you for telling me that. Honestly, thank you. It got to the point where I was afraid I was going to die. I know that sounds like dramatic, but I was also having extremely intense periods. I was bleeding constantly. Like, I just felt like my body was on the verge of shutting down. And if this is what living was like, then I didn't want to live. And so at that point, it became a choice of, do I want to die like this? Or do I want to try and make it better? And it took me a year of therapy to get to the point where I could mentally see a doctor because I was so paranoid from all the things I'd heard. And part of that paranoia came from an experience I had when I first entered the body positive movement, where I went to a doctor. At this point, I was still really active. I was running about 3 miles a day. I was smaller than I am currently and eating, pretty healthy. So I went to the doctor. I walked in. She ran all my labs. There was nothing wrong. I did not have, diabetes, prediabetes. At this point, nothing was wrong with me. And she tried to put me on diabetes medication simply because I was overweight, even though my blood labs did not indicate I needed it. Then she tried to sell me a program where I give myself a shot and eat 600 grams of chicken or something like that. Do you know what that is, by the way? It's like some shot you don't eat, and then you eat like a tiny amount of protein, and that's it. And she was like, I want you to do this for 30 days. And I literally was like, hell to the no, no, no. I will not. Do you know what I'm talking about? Do you even know what that is?
I have no idea what that is. I mean, nowadays, with the era of Ozempic, right?
Yeah.
People think shots. That's
No, it
the
was
norm,
not
but
Ozempic.
I don't believe that was the norm.
This was this was before that, and it was like some crazy thing. And then you would reintegrate food. So I remember being terrified because she also sat me down and she's like, you need to exercise more. You need to do this. And I'm like, I'm running 3 miles a day. There is nothing more I can do. So I had that experience, and now let's add to the table. I've gained back the weight. So now I'm 100 pounds heavier. What is that doctor going to say to me now? If that was my last experience, what is that doctor going to say to me now? They're going to say, you're trash. And now I've heard from everybody else around the internet that when you get bigger, it just gets worse and worse and worse. And they're nasty and mean and they do all these things. So my fear of the doctor was intense. So after a year of therapy, I kind of went through it. I saw a doctor through a process of extreme elimination. ZocDoc is amazing to get reviews on doctors so you can at least get a gist of what people like and don't like about them. And so I read all of the reviews, and luckily someone who was plus size had already seen this doctor and said that they were kind and compassionate and all of that. And I said, awesome, I'm going to go to this person. That doctor, I can definitively say, changed my life because they started the process for where I am now. And when I went in to see him, he sat down, and honestly, I walked in with going back to shots. I said, just give me Ozempic. Just do it. If it'll make me feel better, I can't feel this way because I honestly believed that the solution to my problem was that I needed to lose weight.
I mean, okay,
so
sure.
I had worked through therapy to accept that.
I've thought about having that conversation with my doctor, but I'm like, nah, realistically, I don't need that yet. But like, wow. Okay. Sorry.
Losing weight could help my health. I went through a lot of things to try to accept the fact that I was going to have to lose.
I'm just laughing given the context of her being a brand partner with Novo Nordisk and like not disclosing it for a really long time after using it to lose weight and stuff. Yeah, I just, with that context, that was funny.
Lose weight, right? And that wasn't a bad thing, but it was about feeling better. So I went into this doctor and I'm like, just give me the shot. And he literally looked at me and was like, how can I give you a medicine if I don't know if you're sick? And it kind of took me back. He's like, I'm not giving you anything until we read your labs. He's like, I don't know what's going on with you. And that is not a professional thing to do. Just hand over medication to a patient I've just met. So he ran some
bars,
labs on me.
that's good.
And the first thing that came up is that I was in a really bad place. My instincts of the fact that I was on the verge of death weren't necessarily so wrong. I had major
Jesus.
deficiencies in a lot of different vitamins. I had a lot of anemia and I was losing blood. Additionally, I came back as positive for Hashimoto's. So I literally thought, okay, these are the answers, right? So put on the medication for, get on Synthroid, which is what you take for thyroid disorder, or hypo, or the what?
So
I should know
Hashimoto's thyroiditis, it actually can cause hyper or hypo,
Yeah.
depending on it's your body's attack on your thyroid, which affects the production of the thyroid hormone. So a medication like Synthroid is given when you have abnormally levels of low thyroid hormone in your body.
Okay, thank you. So I got put on Synthroid. I got put on all these vitamins. Immediately, things started to improve to a point. I started having more energy. I started having less days in extreme fatigue. So I started to feel better. And I was like, this is it. I've solved all my problems. I started to lose weight just because my thyroid was now working. That's a problem. So I was like, everything's solved. Everything's done. Everything's great. And it was good for a couple months. But then a lot of the stuff started to come back. So I did get relief. It's just not in the permanency that I expected. So I started to have fatigue again. I started to have anemia that we couldn't get under control. And my doctor was like, I think something's wrong with your menstrual cycle, your lady bits. Something's not right down there. So he said, I'm going to refer you to an OBGYN. I probably needed to see one anyway, because again, I hadn't been to the doctor in a really long time. So he referred me to someone that was
Go to the OBGYN if you have a uterus. I'm begging you, please. I know it's scary and it's uncomfortable and I understand, but like it is such necessary healthcare. I'm begging you, please go to the OBGYN. And like, if you don't like the first one you go to, like go find a different one, because I know that it's really important to feel comfortable with yours and like I've lucked it, but please, if you have a uterus, go to the OBGYN. That is, if you take nothing else away from me playing Stardew Valley while listening to a podcast, please go to an OBGYN. Thank you. Okay, bye.
Was with my insurance, and I walked into the room, and he had just built this great perspective of doctors for me. So I went in with full hope and full glory, like the entire medical community has changed. Everything is great. We're respected and cared about now. Yay. And this woman was absolutely terrible to me.
And that does
happen. She would not give me the treatment that my doctor had requested I'd have, because she said that I was just too fat for it. And she refused to give me a pap smear for the same reason. She said that the only thing that was wrong with me was that I was too fat. And repeatedly told me this, to the point where I broke down crying in the parking lot outside. I messaged my doctor in the little portal and I said, I guess I'm just too fat for a normal period. And he was like, listen, I have a friend. He's not going to be covered by your insurance, but he's good. He will listen to you, and he's my friend. His approach to medicine is the same as my approach to medicine. And I remember walking to that office and being like, this is going to be a train wreck again. I don't know if I can take it. If this happens again, I don't know if I can keep going. And he sat me down. He said, I'm not here to treat your weight. I'm here to treat your illness. Again, that same kind of messaging where I'm like, okay, this guy has got it. So he did all of the.
I will say though, weight can affect your cycle and everything. I have experienced that myself. When I was super overweight and like, I was like 315 pounds at my highest, when I was at that point in my life, and I was like on the pill and everything too. So like in theory that should have helped my, like how heavy my periods were and things like that. It was not. And I had really, really, really heavy periods. And that is something that improved like tenfold after I lost weight. And I will say that is not always the case, but like weight, especially in women, weight and your like hormones and things like that are so intertwined, from what I learned, at least in my bariatric program and things like that, that, yeah, I will say like that is something, they can be very intertwined. And I think if you are overweight, that it shouldn't be not part of the conversation. But like, if also like, it shouldn't be the whole conversation, but it also shouldn't be left out of the conversation, in my opinion, in my personal experience.
The things, and he said,
Again, I'm not a doctor, I went to art school, like all of that, but like, it just, in my personal lived experience, like, I don't think that weight should be left out of a conversation regarding periods and things like that, and cycles and things like that, because it really can affect that.
biopsy you. You shouldn't be bleeding this much. You are on all of these iron supplements and you're still anemic. That doesn't seem right. So they ended up doing a biopsy. They did find a growth in my uterus and it was inconclusive. The test was inconclusive. So it could have been cancerous. It could not have been.
Dang.
And he's like, we're going to have a surgery date for you in 3 weeks. You need to get it out. So like, I went in from hearing nothing's wrong with you, you're just fat, to hearing you have a growth and it needs to be removed immediately because we're concerned about its size. Finding out I had to pay out of pocket to receive basic care just because I was in a bigger body was so frustrating and so debilitating, because at this point I'd already spent so much money. I was driving to see doctors. It's like I couldn't catch a break. And then to be in a situation where someone literally refused to give me basic care that my primary care doctor had already requested because they were concerned something was going on is wild to me, right? And that was an acceptable answer and that was okay, and that person felt entirely comfortable doing it. And then to have to pay out of pocket to get the basic standard tests that lots of people get all of the time and find out, oh, I do have a tumor, was just so incredibly frustrating.
To be fair, she could have probably found a different doctor that was covered by her insurance. Like, I doubt that one lady was like the end all be all of doctors, but like, I get what she's saying. Like, my insurance is like super specific on who you can and can't see, in like with who's in network and whatever. And there's like so many options for any kind of doctor. So like, I feel like she could have gone to a different one that was in network, but yeah.
Like, why did I have to pay to find out something that we pretty much already had a good inkling might be happening? Just because
that
someone
is really scary.
Didn't want to believe
like,
it. Someone didn't believe that a plus size
would
person
be really
could
scary.
actually have an issue. That it couldn't be anything other than my weight. There's no way. And I had to pay for someone to believe me. So I was scheduled for surgery 3 weeks later. I had to have some really tough conversations about anesthesia and what that meant in a bigger body. But again, because I had a doctor that actually was educated about plus size, he was able to find an anesthesiologist to work with him that had worked on bigger bodies before. And I was able to have a really successful surgery. Fortunately, when we came out of that surgery, it was benign, the growth, and it was removed, but there began to be questions about my estrogen levels. They weren't necessarily tracking high, but the nature of the growth made it feel like there was potentially too much estrogen in my body. So it didn't make sense. Let's just put it that way. And there's several times in my journey where things don't make sense. So that happened. And again, when I had the
know what correlates with what, but this was something I learned in my bariatric program, was that fat levels, or fat and estrogen, are like linked. And I can't remember how, but they are. And that is like one of the reasons why plus size women are more susceptible to developing from my knowledge, again, this is just what I have learned. I think they are more susceptible to developing things like ovarian cancer and uterine cancer because abnormal amounts of estrogen can cause things like that to happen. And I learned that in my bariatric clinic as well. So yeah, and again, not blaming it all on Anna's weight, but I feel like she's leaving it out of the conversation. And I have learned a lot about this topic and the correlation of estrogen and fat and things like that. So yeah.
A tumor, and I had that removed. That was really scary because we didn't know if it was cancerous or not. It really came down to, oh, this is a hormonal thing. This is, maybe related to your weight, may not be, but we've solved it and we have precautions going forward. That's never going to be an issue again. You're going to feel less anemic. I was like, we've solved it. Everything's done. I'm great. Things are perfect. And then those problems didn't go away. I still have issues with anemia. I still have exhaustion. But every time you go into a surgery or a major treatment like that, you hope on the other side that that's the answer. And it is a little bit of a heartbreak every single time you get that diagnosis and you start that treatment and you think, this is it. This is the time where everything gets better and I can magically be this person that I have dreamed of being or have been previously. And then you find out you can't. And it's hard to keep faith that you'll get there. One of the hardest things about being on a journey to figure out your health, whether it's something like I have or a completely different condition, is that you feel insane 75% of the time because you don't have answers. Like answers, even if they're terrible, knowing what's going on or even the hope of knowing what's going on is the only thing that kind of keeps you alive some days. There's still so much I don't have answers for. And sometimes it does feel like, am I going to feel shitty for the rest of my life? Is my health going to be unpredictable and uncontrollable and unexpected for the rest of my life? So when I stopped losing weight, it became really frustrating. So I ended up.
So that is something that I can 100% empathize with. Like I said, I have a chronic illness. I got diagnosed with it 12 years ago. I was 16. I was literally a junior in high school. And nobody could tell me what was going on. It took I have a whole video on it. It's one of my older videos. You're going to want to watch it at 2x speed because I did not know how to talk for filming yet. But I can totally empathize with that whole experience and how scary it is. And also feeling insane because I did not know what was wrong with me, but I knew something was wrong. I knew my parents knew something was wrong. I knew something was wrong. It was just obvious. And, but it was just so hard because in order to get diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome, you have to have everything else that it could be ruled out. And so it's basically just a whole lot of no's, until you get to your yes, or just the last no. And then you're well, all right, that's what that is. And that's it. And, so I can totally empathize with that. And it also sucks because the people around you can stop believing you too. That's pretty normal, or that's pretty common. I don't know if she'll talk about this, but when I was home for Christmas this year, I got to see one of the teachers that was one of my biggest advocates when I was in school going through all of this, because a lot of teachers were not, and didn't believe what was going on, and I was missing a lot of school because of it. But this one, he was always one of my biggest advocates. He was my high school art teacher. And I finally got to thank him for that 12 years later. And it was super emotional for both of us. And it was really cool. But I can understand this, being, I get where she's coming from with this. I still just think it is kind of irresponsible, or it is irresponsible to not think that weight could be a factor in any of this. But I get where she's coming from with that sentiment.
Working on a campaign related to weight, and I met a doctor that I really loved who studied obesity conditions. And I decided to take a next step and try to figure out what was going on by going to see her. So I started driving to Houston once a month to see this doctor. And I did start taking Ozempic, but the weirdest thing happened through that process is, yes, I lost weight, but not as quickly as they would have imagined. But what did happen is I started to have just a complete reduction in pain and increased mobility. So I started becoming more and more active because the barriers to my activity had suddenly been reduced. So it didn't hurt as much to kneel, or all of my joints used to hurt really bad. So she began to see that that was a little weird. That was another kind of weird behavior. And this starts a kind of trend of things just being slightly off. So she submits a swab for genetic testing for what's called the Rare Obesity Panel. Now, this panel is not the same as the obesity gene panel that you see a lot of people are doing research on right now. These are for conditions that are classified as rare. So like the weird ones. My doctor basically sat me down and she said, listen, I've never had a patient have one of these genes personally, but it is something that we just want to eliminate because your body is not showing normal behavior. So went in, had my rare obesity panel done, and lo and behold, I come back with 2 genes. So essentially what happened when I got my genetic results back is they give you a little counselor that sits down with you and walks you through your genetic tests and what they mean. One of the genes is a known gene. It has a lot of different things associated with it. And then additionally, they were like, oh, by the way, these are so rare, no one will ever research them. So good luck. Have a nice day. Goodbye. Like that's literally what they told me. And
which means nothing.
My doctor there was like, I'm not a geneticist, so we can try things. We can figure out what we can do, but I can't guarantee that it's going to work because at this point, we don't really know. I haven't seen this before. I don't have any previous experience to go off of. She talked to some of her colleagues at a variety of different places. No one had seen the combination of the 2 genes. So there was just really nothing to go on as part of what do we do. About 7 years prior to this, I got an email from a woman and she wrote me an email and was like, I think you have this condition called lipedema. And I was like, okay,
now this is where we're going.
So uncool to try to diagnose somebody on the internet. And I unfortunately talked mad shit about this woman behind her back. And I feel bad because that's mean. At that point, I just was sick of people telling me what they thought about my health. And so I totally tuned it out. I didn't even believe it was a real condition. I think I need to say that. I need to say that I thought it was something made up. Like made up, like, hey, you're delusional. I'm just going to tell you that this is your diagnosis so you stop bothering me, like a pseudo diagnosis. When I started going through this medical process, that word came up again. And I was like, the made up disease. They're just telling me that because they don't want to say we don't know why you're fat. Instead of saying that, we'll give you a fancy, shiny word. You'll feel better about it, but it's just because we don't know. And that's literally what I thought for a very long time. So when I went to the obesity specialist doctor, I did bring up lipedema with her, mostly because I had received that email before. I'd had other doctors allude to that potentially being a problem, but did not understand the condition enough to actually say for sure if it was. And I just wanted a diagnosis. Sometimes you just want someone to tell you like, yep, that's it. So you feel a little less crazy. So I brought it up with her and she was like, yeah, like immediately. Yeah. And then I was like, you're just going to say yes. And she's like, well, we'll do a couple things, but yeah. It was kind of one of those things where like, it's pretty obvious I have it because I don't have any weight on my hands and my feet with how big I am. And
yeah, I mean, I think looking at Anna, like I would never diagnose many people like at all because I, again, I'm not a doctor. I went to art school, but looking at her, I feel like it's like you can tell that she has lipedema. Like that is just like her legs, like she has the legs. And I'm not saying that to be mean. It's just true. Like I can understand why the doctor was like, yes, like for sure. It's kind of like when I got diagnosed with OCD and I just like laid it all out on the table for my psychiatrist. And he was like, absolutely. like he didn't need to ask any more questions. He was just like, yep, you got it. So
because I have orange peel texture, because I have certain ways of accumulation, because it's completely symmetrical, because it's in certain parts of my body, there's just a lot of things that indicate.
So lipedema is, most fat that accumulates in the body. We have peripheral fat we have something called visceral fat, which is on the insides in our organs. And lipedema is a condition where the fat gets almost clumped together in a way that it will never go away with diet and exercise. So it's a type of fat that is different from the normal fat in your body and doesn't respond to the typical ways how fat expands and decreases. So it primarily accumulates on the thighs. Sometimes it can accumulate on the arms, but the character of the fat is also different. So whereas most fat is yellow and spongy, lipedema is typically more hard and isn't as mobile as regular fat. Lipedema is a real condition. It is difficult to differentiate between what is lipedemia and what is just, say, fat as part of general obesity. But specifically, lipedema does not respond to the general ways of how to decrease fat. And so you may be doing a lot of exercising and a lot of dieting, and you may never lose that fat.
And I think on top,
I haven't watched it yet, but I do know that a channel called Colin Mockery did a very like in-depth video on lipedema. And I think it's like 2 hours long or something like that, because I think his like motivation for it was because like Anna has it and talks about it. And again, like I think the whole like issue with this podcast in general, even though I am like agreeing with some of the things that she's saying, I think the issue and everything, and the issue with how she has approached her lipedema on her platform is that is the only reason she is the size that she is. Like, and I just, again, like with Amber Lynn too, like I don't know a lot about it, but like, I just think it's hard to say that like, if someone can get to that size, like just with lipedema. Anna talks that way a lot. And I personally don't think that's true. I think it's a really harmful message to be spreading. And also it's just, again, like for as much shocking self-awareness as she's had in this podcast, I think it's just something that she has not shown, with the lipedema and all of that, the self-awareness part of it. But yeah, I don't know. That's just something that I think a lot of people have issues with this pod. And I know Tiny Blue Anthropologist, talked about too how heavily moderated the comments are on this podcast as well. I think in certain Discord servers and stuff like that, people have taken screenshots of, comments that were there and then were not there like pretty soon after, and that's not good at all, because they were calling out like how much Anna has lied about this whole journey, and how much she is like flipping the narrative about her journey in this podcast, which I feel like we're probably about to get into the nitty-gritty of that in the last 27 minutes. We've been here talking for an hour and a half. But yeah, I think that is the issue. Actually, I know that's the issue. So yeah, Colin Mockery has that video. I haven't watched it yet, but he like talks to a doctor, or like I think he talks to a doctor about it, and like it's very well done from what I've heard. But yeah.
of that too, I live a very public life. Everybody has the ability to see and comment on my life. So when I started talking about potentially having this condition, I received so much backlash that it must be just made up, which is crazy. Like, I am an adult woman with a good education, and still
To Brigham Young University, which is the Mormon college. I don't know how good of a college that is, but I just wanted to put that in here.
when enough people tell you that you're crazy, you begin to wonder if you're the problem. So my obesity doctor did officially give me that diagnosis and was basically like, I'm out of my depth at this point. You need to go see a lipedema specialist. So we did some research. We picked a couple doctors, which I then flew to LA because they were all in LA, the ones that were pretty active in research. So I go to LA, I go see this doctor, and he's like, whoa, you got real bad lipedema. Like, it is real bad. You need to have surgery sooner rather than later. Now, I've got to go back to that feeling about lipedema. I still, at this point, even though I was posting about it, talking about it, because I was trying to justify my body, but internally, deep down inside, I still was like, is this a made up illness? Is this a doctor in LA who wants to sell me plastic surgery? Because also, that is what I heard from a lot of people online. I heard every single day about how I was taking the easy way out and that I was cheating and that I was going to this doctor to magically fix my problems rather than, diet and exercise, calorie in, calorie out solutions. And so I grappled with that even through the surgery process, but I mentally decided if I knew I couldn't lose weight by making the healthy choices I'd made, then what was wrong with trying to get to a better body in this route? I just wanted to feel alive again, because I think once you have a taste of that lifestyle and you're like, wow, if it was just like 25% better than this, then what are all the things I could do? Because I was still limited, right? So it's like, well, what if I can open up just more activity, more movement, more living? And I think one thing that has always bothered me, going back slightly to the plus size community, is they never talk about that loss of living. Let's throw all of the thing about healthy or unhealthy out about bigger bodies. Let's throw all of that out. Let's say that there is literally no health difference. There is a loss of experience and a loss of living that comes from living in a bigger body. So we proceed down the surgical route. We get in for my first surgery. And
also, I don't know where we're at in the timeline, but I think this is the lipedema clinic that she worked with that sponsored her basically, and she didn't have to. I don't know, I doubt she paid for it because she made a lot of content with this clinic and again never really disclosed it properly, which I made a video about because that is insane to me. That is also part of the reason why, even though, again, I am agreeing with Anna here, I'm pausing my game for this. I'm agreeing with Anna in a lot of this, just taking this podcast as it is, but now we're getting into the nitty gritty of stuff that she's lied about a lot. And last year I made a video breaking down a lot of the content that she made with this clinic. And I think that in that video, I was pretty positive that she was working with them and not disclosing it. And this was the second time she had worked with a medical sponsor and not disclosed it properly. And that's just abhorrent to me. It's one thing to not disclose partnerships if it's this lip balm or whatever, but when you are taking weight loss medications, because she partnered with Novo Nordisk, which is the pharmaceutical company behind that makes Ozempic and things like that. I was gonna put this on, but I'm talking too much. She partnered with them and did not disclose it for a very long time. I have a video breaking down that whole timeline from a couple years ago. And then with this, if this is the clinic that she's talking about, she worked with this clinic and she did not disclose it, which I think is absolutely insane. And so she comes off very sympathetic here. She does, but you need the context of who Anna is and how she has done social media her entire career. And in my opinion, it is very unethical and very not chill. But okay, let's keep going.
He goes, wow, your skin's really hard and fibrotic. He goes, still looking at you, I think I'm going to get in there and I think I'm going to need to take 6 liters or something. He gets in there and he ends up taking 9 liters. And he said it was the most fibrotic he's ever seen anyone.
Damn.
So we're having a little bit of, what? That seems a little odd. But whatever. So we have the surgery. He removes way more. He says it's the most fibrotic patient he's ever seen. He said that my legs were literally like concrete under the surface. And I get through the first surgery and instantly my pain levels are entirely different. The first night in the recovery area, I'm dancing. I'm up on my feet dancing because they tell us we have to walk. And the nurse has to be like, yo, calm down. And everyone tells me, oh, it's the pain meds. Once the pain meds come off from surgery on your fifth elbow. No, never went back. I was just like, my life was instantly better. And I was like, oh my God. And I still didn't believe that this was a medical definition deep in my heart. I still thought I was just fat, but that my legs were lighter and that's why everything was better. So of course, I heal to the point where I can for the next surgery. I have my second round of surgeries. My second surgery was really intense. You get a lot of hormone release. So I got depression, but it was like weird because I've never been depressed. So it's not something I have ever dealt with. And
That's not true by Anna's own admission as well in her book. She talks a lot about how, at least that I can remember, I'm like pretty positive she opened up a lot about like her mental health and stuff like that, but also how she kind of maintained this like toxic positivity mindset towards it instead of just getting help for it, which I personally believed when I went through the book, when I like listened to the book. It had to do with her Mormon upbringing, like 1000%. I say 1000%, but that is my own opinion. But yeah, Anna talks a lot about, at least from what I remember, I'm pretty sure she talked a lot about like mental health and things like that. And I think saying you've never been depressed before is a wild statement because I think everybody's been depressed.
When I decided to have surgery, I decided I would be public about it, cover most, if not all of it.
But you didn't disclose that you were what I believe to be working with the clinic, which I think is a pretty big part to leave out, especially in this podcast when you were just talking about how much money you had to pay to get the treatment that you needed.
So while I was recovering from surgery, I started having these really weird comments about bagels. And I was like, why? I don't understand why I'm getting all these comments about bagels. And so I had to ask, what is going on in relation to bagels? I don't understand it. So previously to having surgery, we recorded a video where my doctor had asked me to keep walking prior to surgery, even though my pain had increased significantly because I'd gone off of the Wegovy. So I was no longer having any inflammation support. You also can't take Tylenol. So you're basically like SOL on any type of pain relief, but you need to stay active. So it's not a great time. It is not a fun party. You do not want to go to this event. So I was in New York and I was like, I really want this bagel. Because I have to walk, I'm going to make myself walk 2 miles to get this bagel, right? And I was like, I'll make it a fun little YouTube video. For anyone who's dealing with chronic illness, they'll get it. Pain days are the worst. So I walk, and at various times during this walk, I have to stop and sit down because I'm in pain. And we get to the bagel shop. It is literally just before close. I order my bagel and I'm like, I'm so happy I did this. Look at me. I can do hard things, which is something I really told myself a lot during this journey. You can do hard things. So I was like so excited. And I was like, let's just take a cab home so I can eat this laying down because physically I don't want to move anymore. So we get our bagel, we get in the cab, we drive home. I get home to the hotel. I'm filming myself unwrapping it. And it's not the bagel I ordered. It's not the bagel I walked 2 miles. Now to set context here, I'm having surgery in 2 days. I've been off of all of this medication that helps me stay regular in a lot of different ways. So I am a hormonal nightmare, right? I'm also in a lot of pain. So I just start bawling over this bagel, right? I just am like literally buckets of tears because this is all the stress of my first surgery coming out. This is all the hormones that are rolling around in my body. This is everything coming out. This is the pain I'm feeling because it hurts. So I am crying over this bagel and I was like, I just wanted this bagel, right? And then the next day I order the bagel and that's the end of the video. And I'm like, I got it. It's fine, right? So they pick this video up and they make so many videos about fat girl cries over bagel. And they turn it into a fat girl doesn't get what she wants and so she cries. They erase the entire part about the fact that it had literally nothing to do with the bagel. The bagel was just the thing that I was crying about, but it was
Not
like
about
very
the bagel.
It's not about. And this is what people started to say. So people started commenting Bagelgate and then started commenting it was never about the bagel. So this turns into this whole thing where people are just talking about bagels vaguely around me, and I have no clue what's going on, right? And they knew I was in surgery. They knew that I was having this major surgery, and that's the thing they decided to go in on, is that I cried over a bagel.
Okay. I'm gonna stop laughing and actually talk now. First off, I don't like that she's referring to what she had done as quote-unquote major surgery. I'm pretty sure what she's talking about is liposuction. And, like, any surgery is a big deal, and I understand that. And, like, I think that's something that I need to work on myself, is, like, I'm having this thing done. It's not that big of it, but, like, it is kind of a big deal, and I understand that, for sure. But, like, it's liposuction. So, yeah. But if you don't know what she's talking about, I talked about this in the same video that I talked about her not disclosing working with the clinic, the lipedema clinic. She breaks it down pretty well here, but right before, so the context of this was very important, right? Because she had just posted a video, I'm pretty sure, talking about, like, how much her lipedema and stuff had, like, was affecting her and all of that, and she cried in it, and it was like a whole thing. And then she posted what obviously was like a pre-recorded video of her in New York and having fun in New York and whatever. But in this video, she ate like cotton candy, and she got this bagel, and yes, she did cry when she got the wrong bagel, but it was the way she acted that was very, very entitled surrounding the whole bagel situation, and also how she acted surrounding it on on other social media platforms and stuff like that too, and also the fact that, like, one of the main, as far as I know, one of the first recommendations you get to treat lipedema is to limit your carb intake, because it can cause really bad inflammation. And so that's where a lot of the criticism was coming from too, because she had just posted this video about lipedema and like crying about it and stuff like that, which very valid, whatever. But then, like, she's eating bagels and cotton candy and stuff like that and acting really rude and entitled, which, again, context matters, because in like December of 2023, I made a reaction video to this video, but she goes around Target and she just, like, is a hurricane and just, like, fucks up the whole store and doesn't clean up after herself, and, like, acts super entitled and super whiny in that video too. And that is just a recurring theme with Anna, and, like, I talk about that a lot in my history lesson on her, is that she just acts very entitled and very whiny and, like, doesn't take responsibility for anything or accountability for anything. And I think the bagel situation was just, like, another example of that for people. Now, in this podcast, she is saying that hormones were involved, and, like, I understand. And in my video talking about the bagel situation, I even said, I've cried over dumb shit. I just cried over a box today that I couldn't move. I had been on the verge of tears all week, and a fucking box threw me over the edge, okay? Like, I get it. I understand. I understand that, especially as a person who gets periods and stuff like that. Like, hormones will do you in, and I understand that. But, I will say it was just the context of everything surrounding the bagel, and, like, just the lack of self-awareness and the lack of accountability around the way she told this story is, like, everything that I feel like take it out of context, this podcast could be very impactful, but take it out of context also, it's very, like, it's not true. Like I feel like people who don't know what I'm trying to say is, I feel like people who don't know who Anna is are going to listen to this podcast. They're gonna be like, wow, this poor girl. But, like, she has shown her ass so many times on social media of, like, what kind of person even if it's a character or something, still, like, what kind of person she puts herself out to be on social media is, like, not great. And so I really just think the bagel thing was just another instance of that. And yeah, context matters with Bagelgate, and I promise you that.
And I'm just like, y'all, I just had a major surgery. There was no compassion for me as a human being at all. And then I begin to wonder, is it really worth going through this 2 or 3 more times? It's hard. Recovery is a process. Even with the great results I had from the first surgery, recovery from a major surgery is rough. So everything's kind of on pause, right? And I even paused and moved my surgeries a little bit later. And I honestly, my doctor's going to listen to this and be like, you were considering not doing your other surgeries. I'm sure of it. But I was, because again, I thought I was delusional. I still at this point thought that this was a fake condition, even though I was advocating for it and talking about it. I feel like such a scam. So I started to have really, really bad inflammation post the second surgery. And I've always had issues with inflammation. It's always been part of the journey, but it became really obvious through this because they just took 22 liters total, so 50 pounds out of my body. And I was heavier than the day I went in for my first surgery. And that was crazy. Like, that was unusual. So they had me go see a specialist in Tucson. Her name is Dr. Herbst. So Dr. Herbst is a board certified endocrinologist that is actually researching the genetics related to fat disorders like lipedema, for example. And if you know anything about lipedema, she is the OG. She is the queen. She's the queen. And I go and see her.
I do think, from what I watched of Tiny Blue Anthropologist video, I do think that a lot of other specialists in lipedema, around the world, don't like this doctor that Anna's talking about. And I think Colin Mockery covers that in his video. Again, I have not watched it. I am not well versed on this, but that's the tea about this person. So there's that as well.
I'm still having all of this inside. I'm still debating if I'm going to do the other surgeries. I'm like, is this worth it? Is this just cosmetic? I'm starting to have, with the inflammation, a lot of exhaustion and stuff like that, which is natural with inflammation. So she does 2 things that caused the aha moment for me. She's like, I'm going to do some, I don't know the name of this, but it is a thing where they do thermal imaging to see how congested your veins are. So they take pictures and it shows almost like a heat map where your veins are enlarged and trapped. So she does thermal imaging of my body, lets me see it, and I can see everywhere that I haven't had surgery is bright purple. On my hands, my feet, my face, and the places I had surgery, I have no congestion. So she looks at this thermal imaging and she's like, wow, you're super congested. We talk about some of the areas I have pain. We can see corresponding congestion in that area. She points to a bump on my arm, which I thought was a fat roll. I'm going to be very real with you. I thought it was a fat roll. It's right here, like where you can see kind of like a bump coming out of my arm. And she goes, I don't think that bump is fat. And I was like, oh, it's gotta be fat. And she goes, no, that's not fat. So she pulls out an ultrasound and she shows me what's going on under there. And it is a vein that is, I guess, leaked. And sitting under here, and this is the area I haven't had surgery yet, I'm having in January, is just a giant pool of plasma that is just sitting in my body. And you can see it. It's wild. And that's when it clicked for me that this is a real illness, that this is a real thing, because I saw in my body the congested veins and I saw the pooling out in my arm. We also ultrasound a variety of different places that were not surgical yet and saw that all of the lower veins in the body have been compressed and they're not able to work. And the blood is traveling through the top veins, which have now expanded and are engorged. So that's what's causing a lot of the pain and congestion in my body, is because my blood is moving through 1/8 of the veins it should be moving through.
Probably ties back to your anemia.
Yeah. Well, we're going to keep going down this because we're not done. So she's looking at all of this and she goes, let me take a look at your thighs. And she looks down at my thighs and she's like, oh my gosh, it's like teeth. I've never seen this before. And this is where I just had surgery. So I produce very quickly, or at least we see from this ultrasound, scar tissue. I produce scar tissue at a rapid rate because I had literally had surgery 3 weeks before. I should not have had the level of fibrosis that I had in my legs. And she literally, like, this is the woman that's seen every lipedema patient in the planet, looks at it and goes, oh my gosh, I've never seen this before, which is not what you want to hear, by the
Never
way.
a comforting feeling.
No, not a great feeling. And then she goes, I want to talk to you about your genes. And this becomes the first time I begin to understand what these genes do. So she pulls her computer aside. She sits me down. She says, I want to talk to you about your genes. And she goes, you have 2 very interesting variants, and they're both related to the same thing. And she goes, they're related to apoptosis. And I'm like, well, what the hell is that? And I will tell you, if you ever have a geneticist explain to you what something is, their dumbed down version will still be too hard to understand. Because I literally had to be like, can you give me an even dumber version? I have absolutely no clue what you're talking about. But from what I gathered, my dead cells do not properly leave the body and they cause havoc. So that would explain scar tissue forming. It would explain estrogen that was supposed to be taken out of the body not leaving properly. It would explain inflammation problems, not having, clear routes to getting things out of the body.
Well, what's interesting is, and it may be something different, but I don't think so, but apoptosis.
Oh, that's what it is. Yes. Okay.
Okay.
Sorry.
So apoptosis is the process in which a cell dies.
Yes, that's it. Sorry, I honestly don't know anything yet.
Clears the cells. No, you were actually explaining it perfectly. And it is normal for all of our cells to go through this process of dying and then regenerating. That's in our bone marrow, right? That's where we generate new cells. And so it is normal for our cells to die. There are other cells in our body, primarily it's called the macrophage. Which
she said that word.
Part of the immune system.
This is how she tried to explain it to me.
That then gobbles up those dead cells, and then they go through the rest of your body, and they're cleared. But a problem with apoptosis means that those dead cells don't actually get cleared in the proper way, and so probably all of the cellular material is then what is contributing to the fibrosis, which for people who don't understand what fibrosis is, it's like a thickening and like a hardening of the tissues, almost like a woody characteristic, I guess would be the best kind of way to describe it. Similar to scarring. Scarring is supposed to be a regenerative process, right? It starts by you have a cut, you recruit inflammatory cells. If you don't recruit those, and that's why it gets a little raised and red and swollen, that's actually normal. That's part of the normal process. And then over time, that scar starts to thin out, soften over the period of a year. So there's an evolution, and it's all based on individual cell mechanisms that help with this evolution. So it really does, as I said, a lot of it I think goes back to the genetics, which we're only at the point where we are able to identify a lot of the issues. Now the next challenge is to say, okay, so now what do we do?
Exactly. So essentially, this is the person that is most experienced in this who has never seen this gene before. This pairing of genes, and they are both related to apoptosis. There's limited information, i.e. there's no medical research written about it. It's either been hypothesized or tracked in some way, but it's not like there's no knowledge of other than it's related to this function, what it actually does. So now we know that these genes caused all my symptoms, the weight stuff, the anemia, the lipedema, the tumor, the thyroid issues, but we can't really do anything about it. So the conclusion of my story now, and then it's kind of a sad conclusion, but at least I have a team of people looking into it, is that I am, as it stands right now, I don't want to say a one of one because there's probably somebody out there that's also dealing with this, but for most of the people I'm working with, I'm the only person they've seen with this. So this is all likely genetic, which was great to hear, but a little bit scary because it means it's more complicated. So we've begun the process of sequencing my genes to start, and I'm going to mess this up because, again, this is so out of my depth of understanding, but they're starting to try different pathways to try to understand how my body reacts. Does this make sense? They keep saying we're going to run these pathways on it, and I don't know what that means, but it means that they're going to test and see, I guess, if they do this, does my genes do something different? I don't know. But the goal is to see what is happening with that. What was the word?
Apoptosis.
I keep calling it apoptosis, and I have been calling it the wrong thing. So apoptosis.
Apoptosis.
They want to see where else that's having issues, but they think that it's causing me to have stored estrogen. They think it's causing me to have that weird fibrosis that grows just really, really quickly, which explains why I kept gaining weight even when I was not having behaviors that would drive weight gain. And it's also potentially a different way of getting lipedema because it's genetically related versus potentially hormonal. I mean, it's all genetically related, but it's a version that they haven't seen in this capacity. So it's an atypical case. I guess that's the easiest way to say it. And it is unresolved. But at least we know it's related to apoptosis.
Sorry, I'm looking for
and
comments
anything I'm going to be doing at this point will help other people with issues with apoptosis in the future. Again, that's not a common thing, but hopefully, finding a geneticist that actually will look into it is amazing because that's hard. I was told I would never find one. And then also having the resources to financially be able to afford all of this. And I think, I hope as this...
Yeah, except you work with clinics and you don't disclose it. And not everybody has that privilege. Oh, that's the one thing about Anna that grinds my gears the most, I think.
Series goes on, we talk about that a little bit too, because a lot of these things are not accessible and not affordable and not covered by insurance. Definitely not covered by insurance.
Yeah, but influencers can just work with it and work with them and not lie about it.
I know it's been very, very recent. Knowing that your whole life, all of these struggles have been related to a genetic condition, something that you literally cannot control and had nothing to do with a lifestyle choice, or if you just had better habits.
I am still coming to terms with that, even though I can only see the times in my life when I should have done better. I still, even with all of this, even though I now have accepted the condition, even though I now have this genetic insight and all of these other things, I still see every moment in my life when I could have done better. And there's still so much guilt and shame around choices that I thought could have been better. And I have been publicly pushing myself to make choices that I once perceived as bad because I think that I need to learn how to get over that shame, because it's not healthy to carry that burden. Even knowing it's not my fault, I still feel like it is. There is a community of doctors who still do believe that obesity is the individual's fault. And it's not like 10% of our population is overweight. It's like 60% of our population. All these people are getting overweight. What is going on? Changing? Our food could be changing. Our environments could be changing. Our socioeconomic situations could be changing. What is causing people to gain weight? So let's take the morality out of it completely. Like, let's take the choice out of it and say it's not a person's choice. So if it's not their choice, if nobody would choose this, we have to start looking at this as something that's actually a medical issue versus punishing people. I have gone at great lengths to share my medical journey, which at times I've really regretted, to be honest. Like, it's hard. And even with some of the best doctors in the world voicing in on this, people still don't believe me. And sometimes I don't believe it, even though I do. Like, it's this, I can't explain it. When you realize you're just this, your body is unusual. You're like, did they make a mistake? Was the genetics off? Like, what happened, right? I guess I just don't want it to be true. And I think the harder part about this is, like, I thought when I started the lipedema surgeries that it would just magically solve everything, or at least I'd get the body that I wanted and had tried for. And I will get that body for some time, but because of the way my body builds fibrosis, it may not be for as long as I want it to be. And, I'm going to keep trying everything that the doctors suggest to me and encourage me to do. But when I really think about it, it's like, I'm going to share something really sad. And I'm sorry I'm going to end this on such a sad note, but I was talking with someone the other week and they were like, you're getting older. Are you concerned about not having kids? And I was like, I don't want to give them this. And the reality is I can. And that's a hard thing to think about. That your genes are bad. And I often sometimes, I'm sorry, this is so sad. This is so depressing, but I sometimes think about, like, am I meant to be alive? Because all these things.
Okay, I'm just gonna stop this here because I think we're done with the story, but I am reading some reviews on this podcast on podbay.fm. And, I mean, pretty much everybody's saying the same thing. I feel like... this is hard for me, okay? This is really hard. This is honestly, like, kind of hard for me. I'm gonna make myself bigger here for this last little bit. This is hard for me because I can empathize so much with going through the long, arduous process of getting diagnosed with what is more or less like an invisible chronic illness, right? Like, I can empathize with that a lot. And I can empathize with it as a fat person because my chronic illness was written off because of my weight so many times, and it was so frustrating. I understand that, and if what Anna is saying in this podcast is true, then, like, I'm happy she finally got the answers and everything. But I think what's really important here when we talk about this podcast, when we talk about Anna telling her story, is that we remember how much of an unreliable narrator she is. And that is, like, one of the common comments and reviews that it's one of the more common reviews I'm seeing of this whole thing, is that Anna's a very unreliable narrator and maybe can't be trusted telling this story because she's told it so many times across so many different things, and it changes every single time. But it does sound also that some of this information is newer, and is something that she, like, just found out, so that could be something as well. But I don't know, like, it's really hard because I don't necessarily love Anna as a content creator, and that is why I'm so vocal about that on this platform, because I think she lies to her audience over and over and over again about really stupid stuff. And I don't know. And this also, like, it's just, there's just so much lore and so much context that's missing from this whole thing that, like, it's hard to take it seriously. But also, like I said, I can empathize with it so much because I've gone through something so similar. But I think more or less the thing that's hardest to listen to is the, like, lack of accountability and, like, maybe how lifestyle choices could have impacted Anna as well, because there are plenty of people with lymphedema, who are not the size that Anna is, the size that, like, Amberlynn is, right? And I think it gets used as a crutch a lot by people with it who are super morbidly obese. And yeah, I don't know. This was really interesting. I just I don't know, man. I think there is a lot of context left out, and I think the way she told the bagel story kind of makes me question the way she's telling this entire story. And I'm happy to see people in the comments being critical, and also calling out the misinformation and things like that. I'll be honest, I don't know enough about the medical aspect of any of this to call it misinformation. I just don't. But I know enough about Anna to know to be skeptical when I'm listening to it. I will say also, because they've posted a second episode of this, and the person's name was Kathy, and they were talking, this review said it was really disheartening to hear Anna's reaction to Kathy telling her story. Kathy shared a lifelong journey that included pain, depression, unaliving ideation. Believe me, I hate that I have to say that instead of the actual one. Okay, I hate it. Hopelessness and loss, but throughout it all, Anna laughed, joked, and made a mockery of Kathy. And it looks like it's longer, but it's not letting me read it. I'll have to listen to that, because if that's true, that's bullshit. Yeah, I obviously don't love Anna as a content creator, and I went into this with a healthy dose of skepticism. And I think everybody should, but not everybody knows the context of Anna. I was happy to see that when I Googled, my history lesson popped up, so that was good. So hopefully maybe people watch that and then listen to the podcast. I don't know. But yeah, that was the end of this. I've been going on for 2 hours. So I'm gonna kick it back to Better Camera Megan to close us out. Yeah, okay, bye! So I think I said everything that I wanted to say in the reaction footage, so I won't keep you here too much longer. But leave a bagel emoji if you made it this far. And again, thank you so much for 100K. It means the most. It's so weird to be here, but I'm so excited. Yeah. Remember to be kind to yourself, be kind to others, drink your water, take your meds if you need them, and I will see you in the next one. Okay, bye.